To give a little bit of an intro, and I'm going to be one of the speakers here, along with Charles and Adam. This is a talk that the three of us have given once together, and I think Charles and I have given versions of this talk, oh God, probably
3 dozen times.
Yeah, at least. And it's a point of, it's sort of a passion point for us. So what we're going to do, and this will be sort of the typical format of our chapter meetings, is we'll give a general download in the beginning of our meeting time together, sort of what Charles just walked us through with committee updates and things like that. And then the second portion of this will be the speaker portion, followed by, question and answer. We'll do that this evening as well. And a little bit of a networking, fellowship time after. And, that'll especially be beneficial as we're meeting together, but I think we can do that digitally here tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Charles again to start to lead us through this sort of informal discussion this evening, talking about the modern apartment architecture of in and around Denver, certainly centered around with ideas around COVID and stay at home and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So like Josh said, we've given this before, and what we really want to talk about in this, we've called it many names. We've called it apartment modernism, developer-driven modernism, and then sort of another name is the shit you hate and why it's great. So, and a big part of this is bringing awareness about why are these apartment buildings that so many people in the world live in, that we drive by every day. Most people would probably look at this one pictured here and just think that where is that? Oh, it's probably in Soviet Russia or something like that. It's nasty. It's, that's got to be so cold and harsh, but it's really the opposite.
It's brutal, right?
Yeah, it's brutal because it's concrete, but this is really the opposite. I mean, just look at the amount of glass that this community is getting. And when we talk about these buildings, we talk about the language and the honesty of that language and its architecture, that form truly follows function here. And
not necessarily just in this building as a slot.
Yeah, this is just one example.
It's an attitude. And I mean, you're right. I mean, for the most part, people ignore these buildings. It's fun to talk about a bunch of little mid-mod houses in some neighborhood. That's fun. People can get into that. Mm-hmm. These buildings, for the average person, are difficult to understand, or they're difficult to appreciate. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of the forgotten modern architecture of my God, every city across the country, right? I mean, these buildings are everywhere. But to me, this is an ultimate expression of what they were trying to do at that time. Now, these are often, they can be affordable jobs, but this is about honesty. There's a clarity, there's a simplicity. And to me, these are some of my favorite buildings.
And when we look at this building in particular, these buildings are really responding to something, I think. And that's that, what's the biggest thing that you give up when you are no longer living in a single family home or even a town home or something like that? It's outdoor living. It's your outdoor space.
Yeah, these things are totally indoor, outdoor, most of them. I mean, you look at a lot of the apartment buildings that we do right now, you're talking about little 5x7s or something, little outdoor things. They're totally, it's a check mark. These are really about how you live. It's a modernist attitude, right?
Mm-hmm. And so in this particular slide, you see the amount of light that these units are getting, that, you know, those glass living areas are screened.
Do you think there's sunrooms, or are they?
That particular building is a Roland Wilson, even though it doesn't look like Roland. Roland did a ton of work across Colorado. Thousands of living units in the state. When people drive, you know, you'll hear people talk about, oh my God, all those, you know, all those precast double T apartment buildings all over the city, those 60s apartment buildings. They're actually talking about Roland's buildings. The man did them all.
And he did low rise, mid rise, and
yeah. I mean, he did everything. It was all of the kit parts. This one's a little bit different than as usual because you can't actually see the T's, but this is a double T building, and I know for a fact that that's an extension of the living room. Now there's sliding glass doors in all of those and screens, and you can open up the whole end of that living room, and it becomes a lanai.
So in this case, it's not really a lanai; it's really an extension of living space. But so the building we're in right now, you can see the big sliding glass doors behind Josh. This one does have a lanai. It does have a large outdoor space, large enough that you could dine out there.
Yeah.
You could put a couch out there, like an outdoor living room set. How does that compare to the buildings that are being designed today?
Well, I mean, that's an 8 by 32 foot balcony covered, right? No step. It's the same indoor-outdoor carpeting that's out there. It's the same indoor-outdoor carpeting that's in here. It's glass, wall, floor to ceiling, wall to wall, and most of it's operable. But it increases an 800 square foot living unit to, I mean, my God, you've got 300 square feet just outside, right? It makes an enormous difference, and it's that indoor-outdoor living that you find in single-family homes in the same area that other guys were doing around town.
Yeah, and it's something that residents, after spending the last year since March, in their homes, in their apartments, in these new great apartments that we have, they're begging for outdoor space. You know, all of their common areas are closed because they're common areas and they can't have them open, and so they're sort of stuck with their token balconies and outdoor spaces that they have. So
can you imagine living in, I mean, 800 square feet, that's a big one-bed apartment. That's a big one-bed apartment these days. I mean, can you imagine living in 600 square feet?
Especially with a partner.
Yeah, living in there with whoever. Yeah, my God, there's no escape. There's no place to go. There's no place to be away. And especially in these times, it is really showed. Even the quality of life, living in something that doesn't have glass, huge deal.
Should we go to the next slide here?
yeah, let's show the next one. So what we really want to accomplish, I think, with this presentation is we want to showcase the significance and the importance of these apartment buildings that are often overlooked, even by, you know, us in this meeting right now as, you know, professionals in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, Charles, you know, well, Charles has experience doing apartment design. I certainly do. You know, these are buildings that we're surrounded by every day and we don't even look at them.
And so,
With the way that design is being almost codified now, would the city even allow a building like this to be built today?
Oh, hell no. You couldn't afford to do it. I mean, you know, and so like that slide there, that's the Welshire Arms. That's the building.
Which is the building we're in right now. We're coming to you live from this building on the screen.
So that was done in '62 by a guy named Vince Rieger. A single family home developer, and went on to do bigger buildings. Didn't do a lot of them, but what he did was very, very good. You know, no, we couldn't do this. I mean, you couldn't, first off, you couldn't build this building where it is now. You couldn't afford to do the construction type. And my God, I mean, even if you could, the city wouldn't let you build that. They would have a look at that, and you don't have enough material changes, you don't got enough building articulation, you know, all of this stuff. Well, no, you'd never be able to build that.
And so what we're sort of left with is this huge collection of buildings just like this, and they're all reaching that age of, hey, what do we do with these? Do we just keep them as is? Do we renovate them? How much do we renovate them? Do we tear them down and build something else?
Well,
so that's the questions that are being asked in every single one of these buildings. And what we want to show is that these are of merit, that they should be preserved in usually their original condition, instead of trying to shove in some current day things that are going to be outdated in a few years anyways.
But as we were talking about too, not only should they be preserved, but shouldn't they be held as exemplars of maybe how we should be designing multifamily buildings today?
100%. I mean, they're really, really special. I mean, and there's a lot of different, just across town, you'll find so many different, because there were a lot of different developers. You know, everybody thinks of these developers as these, you know, evil, money hungry, they're raping our city. And, you know, there's really not that much room and meat left on the bone these days, right? I mean, this stuff is tight. This was an era at that time when land was cheap, material was cheap, labor was cheap. We could build the best damn thing that we wanted to. You look at these buildings, they're all concrete, right? Like this one here on the slide. All it is a stack of floor slabs. That's it. The rest of it is glass. There's no building there. This is people's lives. Like, this is pure Corbusier, you know, they're all raised up off of the ground. They're all on pilotis with little amenity zones in the ground level. Everything's about honesty. Like where you see the punched openings in that drawing, right? That's the only place where the bedrooms touch the outside wall. That's it. And it's only the secondary bedrooms. You can read the building. The rest of it's all living space. There's like nothing to it. It's honest.
And just to make a point about the livability of, you know, because there's questions of, oh, you know, right, people don't really like living in these. In this particular one, as just one example, when he built this in 63, 62, it was 100% leased up. It's always been rentals. And up until recently, it's never really had any vacancy because it had the longest tenancy in the state, because people loved living in these units so much, they never moved out.
Yeah.
I mean, even right now, there's tenants here that have lived here for close to 30 years. And the average tenancy in this building was probably anywhere from 10 to 20 years.
Yes. Which is incredible for a full rent building. You don't see that. Our average tenancy across the city for, you know, just an average building, a new building, whatever, is less than a year or a year. You're not seeing people living in a unit for rent for 30 years.
For decades.
I'm the third person to live in this unit since 1962. The third. That's unbelievable. And that's that typical one bed that's shown on the slides.
So we're in the unit on the left here, and all that line across the top, that's all glass.
Yeah. I mean, even look at, like, you know, the strategies for, you know, these people have things. This was a period that we treated apartment design was not like a long-term hotel. This was designed as a home. Look at a one bedroom, an 800 square foot one bed, has
Which is already huge.
walk-in closets in 62. Regular 2-foot deep closets on either side of the entrance door.
Yeah, and you have a foyer. I mean, how many?
There's dignity to it. You have an entrance. There's a sequence. There's a progression. And it's all happening in just one of these little units.
And the spaces have been crafted, and you're not just walking in your door and you can
Dumped
see
into a
your whole unit. And then you have to think about what to do with just this empty room. You have the spaces crafted for you here, and that's really the big difference, I think, between a lot of these buildings and the ones we're doing today, is that these were designed as homes. I mean, my first apartment here in Denver, I think we had one of these 2-foot deep closets, and it was only 6 feet long instead of 8. And that was it. That was all the storage in the entire apartment. And
even like look at the corner balcony. You know, that living room doesn't read as well. Holy hell! Can you imagine doing, what is that? Like a 16 by 20?
Yeah,
Or something like that?
14 by 20 and a half.
Yeah, I mean, and then you've got indoor outdoor carpeting in these things that runs out onto the balcony. So that floor line just passes right through the glass all the way to the slab edge. Your living room looks like it's enormous. That's really neat.
And you can't see it very well, but if you look behind Josh's head over here, there's actually a soffit that comes down to meet the standard height of the sliding doors, which also then encloses the HVAC loop on the floor.
Yeah. That's a big, I mean, the best for the most for the least, I mean, right? All this whole period. And not to forget, these are this is developer-driven modernism. This stuff has to be cost-effective and make sense. All of that glazing, that's the whole exterior of these buildings, they're all set at 6'8", like Adam said. So it's a standard size sliding glass door unit. And all of that glazing is just based on a standard size slider, so it brings the cost down. Not having to run duct work through our slabs, it brings the cost down. You keep it all on the exterior where you need it. There's so many tricks. You even look at like the poche in the walls. Look how skinny the walls are in there. That's a wire wall system. From finish face to finish face is, I think, less than 2 inches. You get all of that floor space back in the unit. And all it is just a wire, it's a double wire with a zigzag in between. And it doesn't allow sound to travel through the wall. But, you get these paper thin walls that are much better for sound transmission than a traditional wall. You get all the wall space back, and the guys can install it on site with a utility knife and tin snips. Those old Roland Wilson buildings, I'm sure everyone has seen like all the precast double T things all around Cheeseman Park, those ones with the enormous square balconies and sticking out. That guy used to do, some of those are like 12 and 15 stories tall. Those buildings were put up like a floor a week. A floor a week. You could get stuff built like that back then. But what an incredible kit of parts.
And speaking of Roland and those apartments off of Cheeseman, those are unique among themselves because at the time, apartments weren't amenitized hardly at all.
No, Roland was the first guy to do that here.
He heavily amenitized his apartments with club rooms, pools, spas, gyms, underground, and he also did underground parking to save room on the site for those amenities. So speaking again about amenities, this is from the brochure of the Welsher.
Which incidentally is not a Roland building, but did have amenities.
Yes.
It's done by another group that I really like. All three of us are big fans of their work, Ramsey and Reeves. And they sort of did a Welsher kit of parts, and they did that all across the state as well.
So here we're looking at, if you were to come and visit the Welsher, you go through the front doors, and this is where you would land, right here in the elevator, and really just the the ground floor of the building. This is it. You have the elevators off to the right, and then you have some seating beyond, sort of behind that lamp was the library. And then there was also a meeting room, because there were a lot of, in the early days, there was a lot of working professionals that would host their business meetings.
So you mean an actual, like a full boardroom?
Full boardroom, and he even had, on the 12th floor, there were 3
Motel units.
guest rooms that were basically hotel rooms for guests, so that they didn't have to stay with you, they could stay in one of the guest rooms on the 12th floor, which, if you know by all the glass already, they got either a view of the Rockies to the north with a view of downtown, or they got a view to the south where they could see Pikes Peak.
Yeah.
I mean, how great is that as a guest?
Well, to your point about the amenities, at the time that this era of building was being built, the market wasn't towards kids. It wasn't towards young adults and kids prior to building a house. These were, for the most part, the high-rise buildings were marketed towards seniors and older adults. These and you know, the amenities show it. When they did have them. You look at all the brochures for these things, and everybody is, I mean, there's no kids, which is very different from how we do things now. The market's just very different.
Now, going back to, like we were talking about before, where we have the health benefits and even the psychological benefits of a lot of natural light, having an outdoor space, all of that fresh air that can come in. When you're looking here on the ground floor and everything is just glass, that's safety. That's Jane Jacobs' eyes on the street. If you're standing back in the corner of that courtyard, you can see who's coming in and out. You could even see who was driving in and out of the property.
Yes.
And that provided a level of safety that, you know who's coming in and out of your place. You know if there's somebody waiting at the door. You can tell if somebody's doing something they're not supposed to, because you can see it all. There's a level of security through that transparency.
So do you feel like a lot of these amenities, both that and then also the types of amenities they were providing, were trying to foster community?
It was all about community. Gene Sternberg did, everyone knows the amount of community stuff that Sternberg did across the state. Gene did a high-rise building, which would be a fantastic case study to look at, called Desi. And this was for retired school teachers. Every floor plate on this thing was centered around a big wide hallway, right? The building plan is sort of an H, if you can imagine that. And it's got a unit mix of 2 bedrooms and studios. There's no one beds based on retired school teachers in 1964, right? But every one of the floor plates was a community room. It wasn't a hallway. It was a place where they all came out into. And even the balcony dividers were held back from the face of the balcony rail, like 16 or 18 inches, so you could walk across onto your neighbor's balcony and get to know your neighbor. These were all people that worked within the same school system for all those years, and they're retiring together. They knew each other. They were friends.
Yeah.
It was pure about, it was totally about community.
And we have the same thing here, where we have corrugated metal.
Exactly.
Balcony partitions, line partitions, but as it gets, the last 18 inches or so are perforated, so that you can still, if you wanted to, talk to your neighbor.
I think you have slides in here about.
And we have that.
And that certainly still happens today. In, my neighbor, I live down here on the 3rd floor.
Well,
and
that's a good, if you go
There we
back.
go.
yeah, so there you can see that where you get the privacy, but then you also get the transparency of being able to get to know your neighbor, have a conversation with them. My neighbor sticks his hand through and pets my dog. They're good buddies. So, that's a level of interaction that is almost unseen. If it would be impossible without something like that, you know.
And you get to know your neighbor.
If that wasn't there, there's no way my neighbor would even see my dog, know that we have one. But he tells us all the time that's the best part of his day, is getting to see the dog, getting to pet him, best part of his day.
Yep.
And that's got to provide a quality of life to him, you know. And that's what that was about.
That's exactly right. You know, I think in that other slide, you could see.
Which one? This one?
Yeah, I mean, look at the transparency of those units. You can see and this is all classic moves. I mean, all these buildings do it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's that standard unit, sliding glass door, 6'8" head. They're 8-foot ceilings, you know, but they feel big. Today, good Lord, you can never put an 8-foot ceiling in anything.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be 9 or 10
Yeah.
in a 500 square foot apartment.
Yeah, you got a 12-foot wide room. There's a ratio of height to depth, right? I mean, it's classical proportions. Is that extra cost of that material worth it? I mean, we could bring the numbers down. These were all about efficiency.
And of course, you also have the benefit of not only when your balcony is 8 feet deep, not only do you have space to dine out there or whatever,
Yeah.
but when you have a south-facing unit, you're not getting direct sunlight into your unit because you basically have an 8-foot sunscreen above your wall of glass.
Yeah, you can be out there and you're still protected from the rain when it's snowing.
Yeah,
you
rain
can,
doesn't blow in
you, you can still sit out there and lounge or eat your meal or do whatever, and you're not affected by the weather.
You know, when these buildings were new, and I've seen it in a number of Ramsey and Reeve projects across Colorado, and Charles, Adam, and myself have been documenting all of these buildings across the state and calling together a nice list. But most of the Ramsey and Reeves projects do this thing, and this picture doesn't show because it doesn't have it anymore, but they would run this industrial strength indoor-outdoor carpeting, and it was inside the unit and it was outside the unit, and just the phenomenology of that.
So you had a visual continuity
It's neat.
and low maintenance flooring inside and out.
Yeah, and it's plastic. You know, I imagine that they probably got bad cigarette burns in them, but I mean, they certainly didn't wear out. What's also interesting is a lot of these buildings were color keyed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we would never do unit interiors colored. You know, everything's just
Neutral.
It's builder, it's putty colors, or all white.
Builder
That's the
beige.
worst. Yeah, but like just this building, for instance, I mean, there were stacks of colors, and 1962, they were all more pastel in color. This particular stack was green, so it had green indoor-outdoor carpeting inside and outside. The walls were green. There was accent walls of green foiled wallpaper. I mean, can you imagine renting a unit based on, well, this one, we only have the blue one. Sorry if all your furniture is burgundy or orange, But there were wild colors. In this particular building, there was purple stack, there was green stack, there was a blue stack, and there was a yellow stack.
Figure out if we have a shot. No, it's just in the bed.
And you can still find, like, because you have found some of the original paint in your unit, that this stack was green. And we believe, after searching my unit, that my stack was purple, right?
Yeah, yours was purple.
Purple.
What's also interesting is that spatially, and I think you can see it in that picture, that the kitchen pod is treated like that. Like when you were looking at the beige, just all the white, that unit that was just all painted white. While the kitchen does have walls and it's not enclosed, it's open to the living space, but it is defined. which is, common for old modern architecture. I mean, there's spatial divisions.
Although in the
defined
50s and
space
60s, having a kitchen at all open was new.
was new, yes. But that kitchen is treated as an accent color floating in the space, and they always were in this particular building. It's neat. I mean, that level of design in just an apartment.
Yeah,
That's neat.
something that was for rent,
For
but it was treated with all the dignity of
a single
anything
family
else.
home.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's why that had, the tendency in these buildings tends to be high. Um,
People were happy here.
Yeah.
They were happy. You couldn't, honestly, I can't afford to buy that house. That's why I've still lived here. I can't afford to buy this house. This house doesn't exist in Colorado. Sure as hell doesn't exist in my price range. This is a better quality of living than I could get anywhere else. A glass box, there's no exterior walls. Good Lord, what am I living in? Farnsworth, right? I mean, it's a serious piece of design.
Yep.
And I can't get that anywhere else. How long was our talk supposed to go?
40 minutes.
Okay.
We're at 7:50 now. Do you want to kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, we can take questions if anybody has some.
What other slides do you have? Did you miss anything?
We have just more of this apartment.
I mean, look how big that bedroom is, guys. You can have separate spaces in the bedroom, right? It's
You really can.
yeah,
It's huge.
it's huge. You can see in that the party walls, and I put that back in, but it was originally grass cloth. I mean, just these things were treated very well. They were finished well.
And even that, I mean, we're showing a lot of pictures of the Welsher, but that's just because this was our initial case study. These are all common features in
So
all of the apartments around town.
and every master bedroom in the Welsher is like this.
Oh my God, some of them are even bigger.
Mhm.
I mean, there's 2 and 3 bedroom units that have, I think the bedrooms in the 3 beds are 24 feet long. That's unbelievable.
They have their own ensuite bathroom, and they also have, of course, the lanai extends around, but they've added a partition there at the master on the 3 beds. So then the master bedroom even has its own private area.
Private lanai.
Uh-huh.
One of the best versions of Ramsey and Reeves stuff is down in Colorado Springs. And it's, I think it's one of the first, if not the first, large-scale mixed-use kind of deal in the state. I think it was done in '69.
Is that the satellite?
Yeah.
That's a cool building.
It's a copy of the Welsher times 3
Mhm.
in a like a bird's foot shape. And there's there's a hotel in it. There's hotel units. There's condo units. There's a retail on the first 2 levels in under the pilotis. And there's a restaurant on the very
It's
top.
a penthouse restaurant.
Mhm.
And that place those units have the balconies wrap around the corner and they've got to be like 3 feet long.
They're bigger than here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but it's a quiet building. It's one of those ones just like this that you drive on by. There's poor people that live in those renter people live in those apartments. We don't want those people near us, right? We don't want an apartment development built in my neighborhood or not in my backyard, But these were different, and they're still there, and we can't afford to tear them down. You can't.
That's a good thing.
They're so damn dense, like this thing. I mean, this is zoned down here for what, 5 stories? This is a 12-story building. I mean, we couldn't put this density on this site.
And again, it's okay. What do we do with these? And as we've seen from previous case studies, especially among apartments, the first thing you do is go in and paint everything white.
Lobby
renovations, and so
Do you convert a building like this into condos?
Yeah, I mean, this building screams. If this was, let's say, 10 or 15, I mean, most of these buildings did go to condos. They don't have to go to condos anymore. You've got, people that development teams that buy up old used properties, put money into them and either flip them to somebody else that's gonna maintain them and operate them. But these don't need to go to condos like they did a few years ago, because I mean, you could rent a cardboard box to somebody in this town, right? And it would be $300 a month. So they don't need the money to go to condos, but a lot of these did go to condos in the 90s. What other pictures do we have? This last one.
Oh, that's the balconies on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, look at that, like we were talking about. This particular building, this is just this building, right? All it is just a stack of slabs and sliding glass doors. How elegant. Raised up on pillowcase. You see the people moving around. It's beautiful. But it's easy to hate these, right? They're not pretty.
They don't have
But they're
ornamentation per se.
I mean, that is a serious piece of modern architecture. And there's so many of them. And they're buildings that are easy not to understand. Why do they do what they do? A lot of the really good pieces of these are beyond, most people. They'll look at it. Well, why doesn't that glass go the whole way to the ceiling? The beauty is, a lot of it is the efficiency. What it created, it brought costs down. It made them affordable. And that's the story of it. I mean,
Well, still, I mean,
building
it's
for the
one thing to
masses.
see it from the street, but I mean, when you see it from these perspectives here, you start to see what the beauty of this building is.
It's the people, it's the life, it's absolute freedom. I mean, everyone thinks, oh, they're like some socialist housing and they're brutal and I hate them. And, they're not that at all. There's nothing here. It's walls and some floor slabs. You're the architecture. Your stuff inside the building. That's you.
it's a vessel for your life.
It's a vessel for
Yeah. And it's a blank canvas when you move in.
Absolutely. There's no crown molding and little stupid things that tell me, oh, my furniture should be this style. It's, there's people in this unit. I mean, there's some guy a few floors down, he's got all this Victorian crazy stuff. I'll tell you, the only thing that these units tell you that you shouldn't put in them is that big postmodern furniture, just because it doesn't fit. The scale's totally off, If you have some 12-foot couch in this room, it's going to totally fill it up. But it's for regular people. I mean, it's high design, for regular people, and it's designed for people that don't expect it, and that's beautiful. And that was what modern architecture was solving, especially well at that time.
Yeah, I mean, one could argue that good design really fades into the background
Does.
as you live your life.
Goes away. You don't even notice it. Most people, when they walk into these units, and I mean, you've told me this plenty of times, Kelly's friends and your relatives and stuff coming on Oak, you would think that the first thing they'd say is, "Oh my God, look at all this glass."
Or look at the size of the balcony.
Nobody says anything.
It's like it's supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's
Of
just
course
natural.
it's that. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're not freaked out by a wall of glass either, that, they're being watched or something weird like that. That's not real. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. A little taste into, some of our work and
Here's a look at the foyer. We didn't look at this photo
Oh.
very long ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's the entrance to a one bed. Isn't that great?
And again, that people view these apartments as being so cold and soulless. I mean, a colleague that we know tells us that all the time, that they're so cold, but it's like, look at how warm that is with all the wood and,
Yeah.
you know, that was the other thing. Not only are you getting all this natural light and glass, you're getting all this nice wood because all the
And it's a
all the doors
transition.
were
You have
wood.
a place to take off your jacket and your shoes and,
With dignity, you're not dumped into a room.
Mhm.
right.
There's a theater about it all before all the glass really reveals itself.
Mhm.
You know, like even the stuff with all the wood, there were developers that did, you know, with glue-on plywood, but they Philippine mahogany
Mhm.
instead of drywall. I mean, Joe Eichler did that in the high-rise buildings that he did, just like he did in the little houses. Reduced costs and it warmed up the buildings.
So we have a few questions here that came in on the chat here. What has changed so that buildings like these are no longer designed this way?
Go ahead.
Well, in my experience, my background is as a planner, and my first instinct to that question is that we have people with no design education writing design guidelines that are purely based on the form and the articulation of how the building looks on the outside. And when you have those constraints placed on designers, it's extremely hard to try and work around a constraint like that, especially when you're working on a project where you have some flexibility, but it needs approval through a public process. And the cities and municipalities and these planners, and I feel comfortable saying this because I am a planner and I know these people, is that for some reason they like to leverage this power that they have of telling developers and architects what they can and can't do. And that is a real hurt. Like, it really pisses me off that my colleagues that consider themselves planners do that. Like, they want to create these great communities, but they're making it so damn hard to actually do it. And, you know, when you have people today that are practicing in the same way that Sternberg did in his time of trying to create these real communities, you know, these planners should be,
You gotta jump through.
And they're
Should
making
be-
seemingly arbitrary rules
should be
Yeah.
giving you
that
the
are
first
more
step.
around edifice than how a building functions.
Yes, that you need.
It's pure postmodern thought.
It's, yeah.
That's the beginning and the end of it. It's a postmodern rationale.
Mhm.
This isn't an ultimate expression of what the buildings do. We don't have the liberty to do that, whatever it is. I mean, we can't afford to build a concrete building like this now and make it an affordable project. But at the time, concrete was cheap. That's why all that stuff in the 70s was built in concrete.
But, you know, materiality aside, if given the flexibility, you could still design with design around the human instead of designing around the street.
Yes.
100%. And I mean, there's guys in the city that are doing this. But yeah, it's a battle, and everybody asks, everybody hates all these apartment buildings and townhomes that are going up. Why do they all, the Denver Fugly movement? Well, okay. Well, when you have to use 3 different materials, X, Y, and Z, because it's appropriate for the neighborhood, and it has to be broken up every 24 feet or every 12 feet, that's why it ends up looking the same.
Mhm.
Because you have so many constraints of design within. And that's not remembering the fact that the developer has to make a buck on this, and we had to turn out a project that's going to make sense and be affordable and that we can construct.
Mhm. There's also there's becoming a major education hurdle in that students are coming out of school and starting to work as professionals, and they don't have the skill or to be able to design. They're trained as working in Revit and working in the computer and just, not using those as just the tools that they are. They're treating them as a crutch for design.
Yeah.
And that's a major hurdle.
And we have another question. It says you touched on this a bit, but how many other folks in the building embrace the design with their own unit? I would think most people would choose to live there, to do so because of the striking design.
No, I mean, I'd say the people that have lived here long, and you know, that was certainly the majority of the building, definitely stayed here probably because of the design. I don't know if they moved here because of it, but they definitely stayed here. And I mean, there's some magic to learn from that. You can't deny that who in their right mind would pay rent for 40 years straight? Why wouldn't you just buy something? Why would you pay rent for 40 years? There's some magic to it. And it's not a whole building full of idiots. There's a logic to it. I mean, why haven't I left here? Why do I pay rent in it? Because I can't afford to buy this building, or you know, this.
Yeah, you'd compromise your lifestyle to go buy something that you could afford.
And I mean, what's also interesting is you go and buy the outside of this thing. Now, you might be able to make up the story that you'd think that all those blinds would all be pulled shut, and all these people that are used to these walls with little holes poked in them feel like they're exposed. If you walk by this thing, all that glass will be open.
Even at night.
Even at night.
And it becomes, how do you put it? It's honesty, and the building is honest, and the people that are living in it become honest as well.
Exactly.
Because they, you know,
what are you doing
Yeah.
that you need to, that you're so ashamed of that somebody else can't see? What are you doing in there? So it's an honest, I mean, it's certainly a lifestyle. Yeah, it's different.
And I would say, you know, a lot of what 50s and 60s modernism was trying to accomplish is an easy living, in informal living, which is great because, as you pointed out, you know, if you're a big fan of Victorian architecture or Victorian furniture, it's just as easy for you to bring that in and live that lifestyle in this building.
Yep.
And there's certainly people that do.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 8 o'clock, actually a little after 8 o'clock. 8:05.
Well, I mean, if we don't have any more questions, we don't have any more questions?
No.
So like Charles said, this date and time next month, we'll be sending out a meeting invite that'll outline, you know, how to get onto the call and everything. Our speaker next month will be Len Siegel, and I'm really looking forward to this. He's going to be giving a talk titled Boulder Modernism, and I'm not exactly sure what we're going to see, but Len is certainly an expert on the subject. So I think it's going to be a great talk. So with that, can I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yes, thank
That
you.
was great. It was really
And we really do encourage you to join the committees. Reach out to us if you're interested in joining, or if you have any questions about how you can participate in our local chapter here. We're very excited about moving forward, and we're glad to have you here.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all next time.